Hi guys, in this video we're going to cover flat bottom, box bottom pouch setup. Just the basics that'll help you get a better product for your customer or your client. So when we're talking about flat bottom pouches, we're talking about a pouch that has an actual box style configuration. So you've got a full front panel, edge to edge, side panels as well, and then a bottom that's fully flat. A flexible box, flat bottom, box bottom pouch. You're going to see a couple different die lines come through. Common die line is going to show all the panels connected together. So you have face 1, face 2, and it folds up like a box. It's literally, you know exactly what sides connect because they connect. So this connects to that, connects like that. So if you're trying to lay up a design that crosses across it, you can still, that's perfectly fine. Most of the time, if you're asking about bleed is not that important. Most printers and pouch manufacturers will take care of a bleed for you, but almost universally it's 5mm. So in this design, we got the bleed point at 5mm out from the edge. Also, die lines for pouches are, like most die lines, actually defining the physical product. So if your die line has curved edges, it means the pouch has curved edges. If the die line has straight edges, means or straight corners, then the pouch has straight corners. You'll also almost always see a box bottom style pouch used with coffee, most commonly used for coffee products. So you're going to have some type of enclosure. This is what easy pull zipper, where the zipper exists only in one face of the bag, and this is a degassing valve. One thing to note, if you have a standard style zipper, many people don't notice, and I'd probably make a different video about this because it's a little more involved. If you have a standard zipper, then what happens on your pouch is that the pouch actually will stop going up at the zipper. So if you put an actual zipper in here, a normal plastic bag zipper, the sides become more like triangles. And if you place anything up above where the zipper is, it's useless because it will never be shown because it's going to have to seal up like this. So an easy pull zipper prevents that and also makes loading very simple for the actual people loading the pouches. Another type of die line you're going to do is a multi-up, and this is how we typically do it here at CarePack. Don't worry about bleed, and also just like with all pouch die lines, these are not bleed lines. These are the seals that hold the pouch together, so you can actual sealed material. You can print in that area, but you don't want to put anything critical in that area. Couple other things. So a good rule of thumb, you'll see it in this next example is not being followed, is to put art and die lines, always keep them separate. You'll see here, if you look at my layer panel off to the right on the screen, they do not have die lines separated. Other than that, this is a pretty good setup. Like with most bags, you want to make sure you're providing vector art as much as possible. Easy way to do that is to do an outline and see what shows and what doesn't. If you have a lot of issues or a lot of elements that are raster graphics, you need to decide, do I really need that? If they are, you want to make sure that they're links and that the links have a good PPI. This is a very high PPI. That's really good. I think we can work with that. One thing you'll notice though, if I go back to my links for a second, is that you want to see if you have any kind of color space issues. So this one seems perfectly fine set up, but if I were to click on, I believe this one here, color space is RGB. So that gets me another point. You always want to be in a CMYK color space, even when you're working with Pantone colors. A little more on color setup. Define your Pantone colors as possible, and make sure you actually write it out. Don't just rely on picking the Pantone color, because this acts as a point of reference. When the printer or whoever's working with your pouches actually gets out their Pantone book and goes to that color, that's how they're going to confirm the color accuracy. And because I know a lot of people now are having trouble with Pantone because Pantone Connect and Adobe don't get along, and you have to pay for all the additional actual Pantone colors to be uploaded into Adobe. And so people, what they do is they pick a CMYK value that's close, but you'll run into problems on press because usually this will get printed out on a plotter, like an Epson True Color, and then we'll look at it and say the color isn't accurate. So providing the actual Pantone colors you're using will really help prevent any errors that you might otherwise run into on press. If you're running to a client that hasn't provided die lines, or you're setting up your own, another key factor is actually providing layers for each of the elements. So again, die line is one layer, art as a separate layer, and then generally you want to call out the finish. Now you might say, finish, do I really need to include that, and how should I include that? This is more for the use of your die line as a communication product. So you're communicating to everyone what you want done. And just like anything else, the more you clearly communicate it, the better. So for a couple examples here, on this finish, I simply replicated my die lines, and I throw in a color, and I'm going to define that color in my color bar. And I can say that color equals matte, or whatever color I want. So in this example here, yellow equals matte. You pull out, the whole bag is matte. There's no way to confuse that. If you were doing spot colors, you would use a different color to pull out those areas that are going to be a spot gloss. Another thing that doesn't hurt is white. So defining white. Here we're going to say that the whole bag has a whiting base. The reason for that is you're usually working with plastics. Unlike paper, the default is not white. The default is going to be a silver or clear. And so implementing this, saying that it has a white base, prevents anyone from misconstruing that this white is actually a transparent color. And just like with other things, you should define white in your bar. That's a few of the most basic things we could cover with flat bottom, box bottom pouch setup. If you're making your own die line, here's a couple of tips. Forget the bleed, go for an actual OD. A lot of times what happens is you need to nail your client down on what size of pouch, edge to edge. So tell them to go to the store, find a brand they like, and measure it edge to edge, edge to edge, and edge to edge. Then you can build proportionally correct artwork that doesn't involve cutting, having parts of your design cut off, or have to go back to revision with a client who might not be happy about that. So always make your die lines proportional. Color mode CMYK. Doesn't hurt to set up document setup as a millimeter if possible. If you're doing any kind of metallization, you want to try and call that out. I see a lot of times where people will put that on the actual art file itself, like they'll pick a very bright green to indicate areas that are metallized. Best to not do that. It's best to pull that off into a separate panel and maybe have a third set of panels that say these areas metallized or these areas special effect. That should hopefully walk you through some of the real basics of developing a good flat bottom design and prepping your die lines for press. If you have any further questions, let us know.